welcome to Below the Hospital. I'm your host, Garland Ray Grisby Sr., Sterile Processing Manager at Sutter Health, CPMC. In this podcast, I ask what some might consider hard questions, but what I think are informative questions about the sterile processing profession. Today, I have with me on the show someone who is no stranger to the industry at all. I have Dolores O'Connell. And Dolores has several decades of experience supporting and managing professionals in the sterile processing and medical logistics fields. She currently works at Sterile as a senior clinical education specialist and presented at the 2025 AMY Exchange on how SPD and HTM departments can work together during facility and equipment planning. So for those of us who are wondering what the acronym HTM stands for, it's Healthcare Technology Management. So Dolores, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So it's actually my pleasure to have you on the show because this topic in particular is something that a lot of folks don't understand about the sterile processing field, or this aspect of sterile processing, facility and equipment planning. So let's lay this groundwork here. What does the equipment planning process look like for HTM professionals like biomedical engineers or clinical engineers?
Well, Garland, as you know, it's a strategic process of identifying, selecting, procuring, and updating the necessary equipment for the reprocessing departments. And this can be SPD, GI, the OR, or even extend out to medical office buildings with clinics, and even dental are starting to get involved in this. Anywhere we have procedures being formed and utilizing reusable instrumentation or medical equipment. Now, this equipment plan is a roadmap for acquiring, maintaining, and updating the tools and devices essential to a hospital, ASC, or clinic. It explores the efficient workflows, accommodates future growth, and prevents costly obsolescence. Components of the equipment plan include a workflow analysis, growth projections, and the all-important maintenance strategy as outlined in ANSI AMY EQ 89. Now, effective planning enhances efficiency, ensures compliance, and future-proofs the department. So the ineffective planning can literally stop operations, leading to outsourcing and additional cost for urgent emergent repair or even replacement.
Wow, that was a lot. That was a lot. So again, these are some of the things that folks don't understand. You mentioned dental. It's interesting because at my facility, we are currently working on a project with the dental folks. So yes, this is interesting and very timely. And so, well, in your experience, are there any common roadblocks or pain points that HTM and sterile processing encounter when they work together?
Yes, actually, there is, and it becomes very historical because there are common issues that arise during facility design, such as undersized spaces or improper layouts that neglect proper reprocessing workflows. As you know, the dirty to clean, it has to be that way. These oversights can significantly hinder efficiency and compliance. And typically, once a facility's been built or renovated, it cannot be changed. You usually only have one shot at it. Therefore, it's important to include customer input and the appropriate team members to gather a broad overview of what is needed for that building.
Wow, absolutely. It reminds me of a saying that my mentor used to tell me a long time ago when I first got in the field. She used to say, "Measure twice, cut once," because once it's designed and once it's up, that's what you have.
And those are wise words even today. And that cannot be understated because when we end up with an undersized space from poor planning, this hampers any future needs and it can compromise our ability to follow the standards, which can put us all in a bad situation.
I know all too often I've heard folks, and I've said it myself, who designed this place? It's all wrong. Um, Interesting. So now you mentioned ANSI Amy EQ89. So are there any standards like that that will help folks during the equipment planning process? If so, what is that?
Well, I would recommend both SPD and their biomed professionals sit down and start with EQ89 because that way you've got a platform of understanding for both groups. Then SPD can go on to introduce ST79, the standards for steam sterilization, as well as ST58 if low temperature sterilization or high level disinfection will be involved. And of course, usually if you have some level of low temp, you're going to need to also look at ST91 for endoscopes and potentially even stretching it out to ST90 for the quality piece and taking a good hard look at quality metrics and indicators during this process.
Okay, folks. So so you hear there is a number of guidance documents that you should have when considering rebuilds or new builds or things like that, right? You mentioned ANSI Amy EQ89, ST79, ST90, and ST91. So those are important documents to have, and they will contribute to a successful project.
Absolutely, because in the end, oftentimes when surveyors come into our departments, the administration team that meets them might often make the statement, we follow the AMI standards. And when that statement is made, it means you follow all of the applicable AMI standards, not just a few. So having that on board, seeing what the indicators are, even for something that may seem as simple as an eye wash station. Do we have them in the correct place? Are they within the time necessary if there's an exposure? And taking a hard look at this in the very beginning prevents costly mistakes.
Absolutely. And when we do call out, oh, we use this standard, they will make sure, they will verify down to something like you just mentioned, eye wash stations and how far they are
Yes.
from the chemicals that's being used that require it. So yeah, a lot of stuff to unpack and to get done appropriately if you are in these planning stages.
Absolutely. And this is something that can't and should not be rushed. Taking the thoughtful look at it right now will save a lot of money in the end.
Absolutely. So, in your talk at the 2025 Amy Exchange, you recommended convening a multidisciplinary team as part of equipment planning. So,
Yes.
who would be involved and what does this process look like?
Well, you've got to pull those key stakeholders together and you've got to have someone from the C suite. They're usually not only the ones that can make the final decision when you're at an impasse or whether to go with path A or path B, but oftentimes they're the chief person there for funding and having their understanding of how things will be funded, when things will be funded. You just need it. There's no way around it. So we cannot omit having C suite support. This is then followed by infection prevention. Again, their input in ensuring that everything is safe for not only the employees, but the patients. And we may need more than one infection preventionist, depending on what the patient demographic is going to be. This is followed by quality and risk management. Of course, our architects, our project design managers, biomed, don't forget biomed, as well as facilities. And there may even be a facilities design and construction team, usually those that are very specialized uh, with reprocessing and the needs for the equipment. What's it going to take not only to install and run the equipment, but what about servicing that equipment on down the road after the construction is complete and the facility is opened? If you're going to have operative, we need someone from the perioperative team or the clinical team, like again, dental clinics, things like that. So a little bit different. And then we can also have our SPD representatives, and that may branch out to SPD itself, a GI specialist. Again, it just depends on that demographic. And finally, we're going to have our ad hoc members. And just depending on what the project is going to be, perhaps we need vendor input. We may need facility partners if we're not going to own the facility, but maybe lease the facility. And what's our urgent emergent plans? What happens when we have something like possibly a boil water order? Will we be canceling cases? Will we be outsourcing? If we're outsourcing, what does that look like? So, even taking a look at the vehicles for transportation way ahead of the curve and having all those potential questions answered as we go along is just key to a successful project.
I would go ahead and say I concur. I definitely concur because I have been part of a complete rebuild. And that task was daunting to say the least. There were tons of key players, folks that I'm like, who are those people? But they mattered at the end because it was either an area that we were servicing, an area that we were going to service, or just folks that needed input on things like you just mentioned. And a lot of times, some folks do get left out of certain things. SPD gets left out of certain things. Biomeds get left out of certain things, and those biomed folks are the one that a lot of times, or the engineers. Those may be the folks that services the equipment initially before it goes out to the vendor. So this is exactly key to understand why this multidisciplinary group is needed. It's not always about, oh, create a multidisciplinary group for infection prevention or process. No, this right here, a construction project, a rebuild, definitely. So yeah, I've been there. I totally understand it. It wasn't a rush project. It took years.
That is what it is. But it was successful at the end,
Yes,
correct?
yes, it was. Yes, it was. And we even planned for the future, but where we failed to do is the future because we got super busy after a while. But it panned out. It worked. And then we ended up having to do a redesign on one portion of the area, and we had to borrow some space from somewhere, but it worked. It definitely worked.
And Garland, that future proofing is so important. And I'm glad you brought that up because we've got to continually think about that. So while we have created this, if we don't take some time to kind of what if, what are the trends that we're seeing with the standards? Because usually we hear about discussion within the standards or maybe gaps and things that we want to address. So if we do need to address something, and I neglected to mention Amy ST 108 earlier, that very important standard for that outlines the water quality needed for successful reprocessing. And while that standard is up and running, a few years ago, as you were planning, and you still may have been working under TIR 34, its predecessor, making sure there is room for a specific water system to deliver the critical water needed to meet those parameters. And future proofing in anticipation of that standard would have been critically important at that time. So there are other trends and things that we may be seeing that we need to think about. We may not be able to act immediately, but do we have an extra few square feet? Do we have something that may be on its way out? Is the trends for a specific modality of sterilization? Are we looking at something that's new and improved? So very, very good point, and I thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and can't stress it enough of how important it is to join these Amy groups, join these Amy committees, because they play a part. Because there's some information that we get that we may not be able to share, but we may be able to urge folks. We may want to get a little bit more space because of something that's coming. So it's great to be part of these Amy groups because you have a little bit of more information than sitting at a facility and waiting on something to happen.
And that is so important. If you pick up any Amy standard and look at the first few pages, you will see the key stakeholders that met and developed that standard. And when you look at the demographics from each person who sat at that table, Their voice is so important, up to and including the end users, the people who will actually have to take those recommendations and put them into action. And you can never have enough end users and their voices, because for reprocessing, we do so many different realms and we're in so many different places, and each one may not be the same. And those voices need to be heard.
Yep. Yep. So, how does the equipment planning process change for the construction of a new facility as opposed to a smaller update or renovation?
Well, time, usually a small renovation is much quicker. However, depending on the volume and the flow, there may need to be some things that are looked at, especially if you're going to continue working, which most places do not want to shut down for 3 or 4 weeks for a remodel. So then it becomes a strategic plan for, are we outsourcing just within our building? Are we moving things to another part so we can work there? Are we having to outsource to some type of mobile unit? Or are we even looking at outsourcing to a sister facility? What's this going to look like? How are we going to keep going? And again, the transportation pieces. If it's within the building, it's very easy. We can use case carts or other enclosed environments to move the instrument sets back and forth. But even if we're going out to a mobile area or a modular area, what does that look like? How are we going to get things from point A to point B? And that's a whole nother set of experts that we should have as key stakeholders as to how we're going to get this done. Again,
Yes.
new builds are the easiest because you can move those walls around, but we have to plan for both.
Yes, we do. So, can you elaborate on the specific kinds of local knowledge that SPD professionals will be able to impart to other departments involved in planning?
Oh, absolutely. Just capacity and throughput. If you currently have 4 sterilizers, you're going into a remodel or a new build, and maybe you're down to 2. How is that going to affect your ability to process cases? That capacity and throughput cannot be understated, because you may not be able to run the volume, the historic volume that you're used to, if you take down the equipment. I know at SPD professionals make it look easy. We send them dirty things, they get decontaminated, they're re-sterilized, they're returned. But there's a lot of steps that happen behind those doors. And anytime we impede the number of washers, ultrasonics, or even sterilizers, we can impact patient care on the other end. So, what do our volumes look like? Do we have specific physicians or surgeons that are going to be doing particular procedures, or maybe even some that are anticipating an upswing? So, again, those key stakeholders, what they can bring with historical knowledge and numbers, and then projected numbers. And then what if we have a sister facility that goes down during all this? Could we possibly be in charge then of assisting them? And if we're already at limited capacity and throughput, that may have to change how we step into this. Again, can we create another space for SPD and allow them to stay in their former space? What does this look like? And these are very hard questions, but with a lot of discernment and a lot of discussion with our stakeholders, we can come to a very reasonable plan, and one that's reasonably easy to implement.
Wow. Yes, definitely. I've been there too. So, one final question, and then I'll let you go. I know you're super busy. What's involved in sustaining any efficiencies created by quality equipment planning?
But maintaining and improving ops by sustaining efficiency, equipment maintenance schedules, and monitoring the KPIs, those key performance indicators, to track performance and identify improvement opportunities. Now, equipment planning does not stop at acquisition. I know a lot of people think it does, but it does not. And we need a robust maintenance strategy. That's just essential. And again, going back to ANSI AMI EQ89, that emphasizes tailoring the maintenance to the device types and context, balancing the resources used, and just aiming for high reliability. For example, those mission critical devices need proactive maintenance to prevent disruptions. And of course, we've got to adapt to change. As much as we would like everything to stay the same, even in the best scenarios, We've got to plan for change and have the right training available to all the team members who will be affected by the process.
Absolutely. Definitely important. We have to adapt to change and we have to have the proper training. Most definitely. Well, Dolores, thank you for an amazing conversation with us today. We look forward to having you back on the show at some point. This was great. We definitely appreciate it.
Well, Garland, it would be my pleasure, and thank you for having me today.
So, folks, as usual, I hope this episode has been useful. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. If you want to support the podcast, you can find us at Below the Hospital on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and Amy Array. Until then, see you when I see you.